So I've gotten comments over the years asking if I do collect model trains, and the short answer of that is yes. So I've been collecting model trains for roughly 12 years, and as the years went on, I have only collected more and more models. However, my interest has sort of been waning a little bit due to college and, look at the prices of newer models nowadays. However, I still manage to go to train shows and probably pick up a secondhand model every now and then. And while the collection has seen its fair share of models every now and then, this collection will go over to the ones I have currently own in my possession. So I do hope you sit back, relax, and get to see what lies within my rather small and modest model train collection. Enjoy the show! So given that I am a CN foamer, it makes sense that I have a majority of CN locomotives in my collection, and well, I'd say it's a rather modest fleet, so let's go with the first one. So this is a Atlas-H40C in the 50th anniversary scheme. To my knowledge, this was the first CN locomotive I actually got my hands on at a train show. I got this in 2014, and it's been a rather modest runner. The model is pretty well detailed, and I say it's an overall looker for the collection. The only thing it kind of lacks is ditch lights, but that's sort of whatever. Nonetheless, it's still a model that is running rather exceptional even after 10 years of being in my possession. Now to something more conventional, an SC70M-2 by Walters. I got this at a hobby shop in 2016, and it's been a rather prominent runner in my collection. It's fairly detailed and a nice representation of CN's more traditional motive power of the 2000s. I remember using this thing a lot to haul coal trains for some reason, and does its job then, I guess. Also, the horn is broken. You can't have modern CN without a GEVO, unfortunately, in the form of a Scale Trains Operator ET44AC, which I got 2 years after the SC70M. The locomotive does lack a plow, and its coupler always got stuck within the rails, and the real unit has a Nathan P5 in real life. Aside from that, the locomotive has been also a prominent runner because modern CN, right? Here's an interesting one, a kit-bashed Athearn Canadian Cat-9. Now, this is an interesting story as I got this locomotive from a train show in Woodstock this year, and I managed to pick this up at a modest price of $60. The locomotive has a custom kit bash cab because, well, the production model was shit, and the model is left in an unfinished state as it lacks number boards, lights, and a few other small details. But for $60, it's a pretty good runner, for the most part. At last, the channel icon himself, number 2423, made by Rapido Trains. In particular, this is the second wave of Cowls, because I know they did one back in 2018. Not to mention having to spend roughly $450 on the model and having to wait 10 months for it to arrive, but I'm happy that the product turned out to be worth the money in the end. It hasn't had a run through overall, but I'm hoping at some point if I do get track, I'm able to run this model. And I honestly say the price is justified because this locomotive is packed with detail in every corner. And it's a model I'm proud to own in my collection. Also, I did make an unboxing video, so you go and check that out if you want to see it.
The Cowl Unit Productions mascot is finally in my possession.
And something small to close off the CN section with another Rapido product, this time being an SW1200 RS. I got this for Christmas in 2018, and it's been my favorite model ever since. Every little detail and feature on this locomotive is just fun to play with. Compared to other locomotives which have seen its fair share of running in, this locomotive still holds up after all this time, as it's pretty fast and rather rapid. It's a pretty good use for switching on my old layouts, and I'm proud to own one in the CN scheme, as it matches with the rest of the CN locomotives on my roster. Easily a favorite of mine. So I own two Norfolk Southern locomotives. Okay, I know the railroad I've talked about a lot on this channel, but I used to like this railroad as a kid, so here's some decent representations of the railroad. Something representing the 80s with this Genesis GP50. I'm gonna be honest with you, this is the most overlooked engine in my collection, as I remember getting this 10 years ago for Christmas, and it's kind of one I tend to forget about despite the fact it's a rather phenomenal model. I haven't ran it a whole lot since, and to my knowledge, the current locomotive was rebuilt into a GP38-2, which is interesting, I guess. And here's something the foamers will go mad over: 8098, the Conrail Heritage Unit by Intermountain. This locomotive has been a childhood favorite of mine, as I loved the Conrail Heritage Unit and I was happy enough to get one on my birthday. At least when I was a kid. The locomotive has seen its fair share of runnings. It's probably fallen off the table once, which probably caused its handrail to get damaged. Whoops. Then again, I was a child and happy to own a heritage unit in my collection. But aside from that, I've yet to even see the real 8098 for myself, which I'm hoping will happen one day. Nonetheless, for a childhood favorite of my collection, it's still a decent runner that holds up. Gotta love Intermountain products, I guess. The other company I own two locomotives of, surprisingly, is Union Pacific, which I know they've been getting into a lot of derailments recently, but here's some of their locomotives that date back to an earlier era of UP. First up with an Alco switcher made by Bachmann Trains. Oh man, this used to be the original switcher in my collection, as I want to own a yard switcher because my old layout did have a rail yard, surprisingly. It's a rather decently fitted model, which represents the time era that most of these Alcos would have been around by then. Also got damaged handrails, but whatever. It's seen a fair use of work over the years, but has been displaced by my CN switcher, and it's only been really used on the rarest occasions. But I'll keep it around because transition era type shit, you know? And here's another standard cab Dash 8 in the form of an older Atlas Dash 8.
It's got them wobbly wheels for some reason.
For a locomotive that costed me $30 at a train show, it's missing a lot of handrails, which I'm hoping to replace. And still a good runner for just $30. I got my money's worth. So basically this section is just the American diesels that don't have their own dedicated category, which there's only 3 represented. First up is a St. Lawrence and Hudson SC40-2, which is a blue box model. I also got this at a pretty cheap price last year at a train show, and it's a pretty good model for what it's worth, aside from the fact the couplers are missing. Yeah, it's not the most accurate model, but it runs at least. This locomotive goes back to when I was a kid, this SC45 by Athern. This was actually the first locomotive I ever got, or at least bought from a hobby shop, and it's seen its fair share of use as the handrails have been damaged. Not to mention it fell off a table one time, which probably could have attributed to that. It has not really aged well, and the motors kinda sound like it's dying, but I do hope to get that fixed one day and maybe get some replacement handrails, but I'll hold on to the SC45 for time's sakes. Next is a weird one, that being an Indiana Railroad GP38 by Atlas. So I got this at a hobby shop in Indianapolis in 2017. Not to mention having a unique service life, being owned by Conrail, then NS, and then falling in the hands of the Indiana Railroad, of course. I've contemplating on selling this locomotive because I deemed it a surplus from time to time, but I've chosen to keep it because it has a weird sentimental value, I guess. And definitely an odd addition to the roster, but a welcome one at that. So definitely the most problematic locomotives on my roster are the steam locomotives. And to show you why, here's a quick lightning round each one of these. Some Canadian National 040, I don't remember how I got this locomotive, and it's missing its face. But it's a pretty fast runner at that. Not one, but 2 tank engines by the same brand. One is customly weathered, the other one's just factory fresh. This one looks like it's seen some good use out of it, while the other one looks like it's barely run in, I guess. One sounds pretty noisy, but still runs, while the other makes me want to die so badly. This one is a 260 I got from a Presidential Choice train set. It's a decent looker, albeit raw on spec, and it's mostly been a slow runner recently. Some brass 442 Atlantic I got at a train show roughly 2 years ago, and I don't remember anything about it. Its tender connection's been broken and it hardly runs. This 462 Pacific I got at a train show in 2019. Its smoke box came off and it's a fast runner. This 284 by River Rossi, it's missing its tender. I got a train show at $30, and it sucks. Body's warped, doesn't run, and just a waste of my money. Basically, this is the area where it's just uncategorized stuff, and of course, let's start off with Percy. I got this guy at a train show back in 2016, hoping to get a Thomas character out of this, only to find out, as usual, it didn't run. The face is probably lost, and I'm not really bothered to go and find it, but Percy. Next up, we have a British locomotive on the list, and that being Hornby's Martello. Yes, that's what the preserved terrier is called. I got this at a train show back in 2018 at the mere cost of $25, which you might think it's a scam, but it's actually a pretty smooth runner. I know Hornby has a new version of this engine available, but I don't really want to go through the process of spending money on it. And to close off this list, we have the weirdest model of my collection. I got this at a hobby shop in Las Vegas of all places 2 years ago, and it's been the most unusual purchase of my whole life. It's decently detailed in my personal opinion, and I would like to get the full set eventually, but for now it's just a power car. Unfortunately, I think I probably got scammed because this thing is questionable in terms of its mechanics. But maybe I'll get around to fixing that one day, I don't know. And there you have it. That is the rather hastily put together model collection video. I do apologize if this is hastily put together and whatnot, and it may not look the best, but then again, I was kind of crunched on a bit of time at the moment because I was out of town and having to re-record some stuff. Not to mention doing this all in one night, but nonetheless, I hope you have a Merry Christmas, and I'll see you all next time. Bye!